And he's planning to discuss information architecture within user-centered experiences and exactly what he does at FJORD. So I will have you take it away, and thank you so much for doing this.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Is there audio? Maybe turn the audio Mac here. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. So today I wanted to just speak briefly about experience architecture and information architecture to that greater degree. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Josh Nard. I work at FJORD, Design and Innovation from Accenture Interactive. This is a consulting and design segment for within Accenture that handles both service design and user experience. It's an amazing group. I could go on and on about how talented the team is and how blessed I am to be a part of them. But I'm just going to table that. I'm going to table the fact, that I'm a Chicagoan and other aspects, and just get right to it. And if you have any other follow-up questions to that, we can certainly try to cover. I'll try to leave a little bit of time at the end to have any Q&A. So just in terms of what we wanted to discuss today, I wanted to just quickly discuss a what and a why, and then do some deeper dives into like a how, when, and where, and just discuss how we apply research, because it's my understanding that a good deal of you are majoring or applying your a potential career in research for user experience. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So we can control audio.
Yeah, I want to make sure, because I just wanted to make sure that I was tailoring the message to all of you, and just make sure that you're just not there yawning and thinking, oh my gosh, this is a waste of my time. So hopefully you get a greater deal of like a strategic vision as to like what we're trying to achieve, and hopefully what that does, if you can take anything out of this meeting today, it's having a better understanding about how information architecture, experience architecture, how we use research to drive visions for companies that we work with, and we work with a great deal of Fortune 500 companies and provide insights across multiple lateral segments of what we call omni-channels, essentially. My first sort of takeaway from this is that architecture is strategic. It's when we talk about information architecture or experience architecture, a good deal of people sometimes say, well, okay, this is the information of an organization of bits and bytes, and the documents go over here, and this silo goes in here. But really what you start to see when we discuss how user experience is applied, and then how information architecture applies that greater principle, it is very strategic in its nature. It is creating a journey, it's creating a path for users to be able to engage with living services. So let's just quickly talk about definitions of what do I mean by experience architecture, if that's just an uncommon term. So Wiki talks about experience architecture being the art and science of articulating clear user journey and stories through information architecture, interaction design, and experience. Okay, gotcha. What do we really discuss when we talk about the greater benefits of experience design and experience architecture? It's about a customer-chosen path within a living service along various touch points that we can identify, we can research, we can evaluate to create a greater joy and recursive use within that product. If anybody is familiar or heard the idea of what living services are, it's a common nomenclature that we use within FJORD to create a greater dialogue on how more and more today, and I envy all of you to be students and to be so young and to be in such an evolving, changing world. I mean, what is occurring is exponential in its nature, and it just must be incredibly exciting for all of you. I hope that you're all excited about that because it's very transformational. It's this concept that when you are taking your research and your knowledge and then able to explain to clients, to customers, or to a company that you may work for someday, to be able to apply what is occurring within the mental models of a user when they have a need, that when they have a behavior to an interaction or to a product. That's the greater experience, and it's those little touch points that are creating. I mean, the mobile, the iPhone, we look at, like, you go back further, like the BlackBerry or anything. Those devices are just the start of where we are going, and I would be a fool to even begin to guess where things are going. But what I can say is, obviously, with the iWatch or the Apple Watch and other segments, I mean, you can start to see where these patterns are, where people are interacting with products, and those are what we call a living service. So one of my favorite quotes is, Alfred Korzybski, probably slaughtering his name here, but the map is not the territory. And what does that mean? It's so easy to chart information architecture on a piece of paper, blueprint it out, say, okay, top down, here's my level 1s, my level 2s, my level 3s, and then everybody's going to get it, because they'll just know that if they go to this tier, they'll be able to navigate accordingly and find all their products. But in reality, the map is not the territory. The map is just a directional aspect to that. When we are immersed in that environment, that becomes the territory. What we are aware of in our contextual surroundings is that ability that we need to make decisions off of that. So those are also behavioral in those nature. So, for example, I am tired. Do I need groceries? These are some of the things that I would make a decision from going.
Hey, Josh?
Yes, go ahead.
Real quick, sorry to interrupt you. Are you switching through your slides right now? Or are
Yes,
you
I am.
Oh, see, we're still seeing you on slide 1.
Oh, dear.
Oh dear. Maybe if you could stop and start your. Yeah, now we see you.
Okay, great.
All right. Let me
Thank you.
just
Sorry about that.
back up for a second. Hit share PowerPoint, but maybe it's not share.
No, I think we are seeing it now. You could go. You could go full screen even if you wanted to, or present or whatever mode. But we're seeing it update now.
Maybe if I choose to just my desktop. Okay, can you see it full screen now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Apologies, everyone. You're probably just thinking, what is, is this the only slide for the Boy, he didn't put a lot of work. Within that, I'll just quickly brief. I mean, and I'll share out a PDF of this at some point if anybody's interested. But here's where we are right now in the discussion. So it's if I were to go to like point A to point B, this is generally where I need to go from A, which is my work in downtown Chicago, to B, which is my home. Okay, so what does that mean? Like if I would look at a map, if I were to look at essentially a information architecture blueprint, this is what I would look at. But in reality, when I'm making decisions throughout my path from leaving work to going home, these are some of the thoughts that are going in my head. Do I need some exercise? Do I want to, for example, walk some of the way? Do I want to get off, take the brown line, which I normally do? That brown line, for example, goes all the way, from downtown up to Paulina, for example. I might want to walk from Paulina and get some additional exercise. But is it snowing out? Is it raining? Am I wearing boots for that matter, or am I wearing nice shoes? These are the decisions that I make to say, well, maybe I don't want to walk. Maybe I want to take the 77 Belmont bus, get off on the Belmont station, and then walk 2 blocks to my home. So in reality, like this is the greater environment that I'm in, and so I'm on the train, I'm looking at signs, but then I'm also using these applications, these living services. This is a great app. I'm just going to call them out, and I've reviewed like well, not reviewed, but just downloaded several transit-like apps. This is one of my favorite, and you can download it at transitapp.com. Just very overly simplistic design. It tells you where you are on your map, and then just below that, it's going to tell you immediate locations and surroundings, and it's going to continuously update to bus stops, which is like what's in blue, versus the L line, which is pink or green or blue. So this is just one example of what's occurring, and I can swipe whether I'm going north or south, east and west on the line, and I can get very immediate, make immediate decisions off of that architecture that's being created. So, if I could just now pause for a moment then and try to give a greater view, if you're not familiar with the differences between service design and user experience. And again, I'm making a lot of assumptions here, so apologies, everyone. I don't mean to insult anybody's, understanding of what you've learned so far in your career. But within that, like we talk about a great deal of when we discuss with clients and we discuss projects, we wrap it around different ecosystems of what you're doing. Are you working? Are you shopping? Are you traveling or learning? Maybe you're exercising. These are greater associations of what you're doing in your day-to-day, and you're making decisions off of that. It's a very cognitive, understanding, and we have to get into that understanding by doing research. So what do? We identify these touch points, which are these little circulars in this very, very flat, very linear design. And hopefully, I'd love to get your feedback at the end of this, because I'm always looking for better ways to visualize this. But if you were to start from that working, and then you were to say, well, okay, I'm at work, now I need to make additional touch points. The service design segment of our practice is identifying what are you doing within the patterns of that day. Are you having to get ready? Are you having to pack your bag? Are you having to identify what clothes to wear that day? All of those different touch points relate to an experience, and then you're making decisions off of that. You might then find ways to interact with an application. For example, you might pull up your mobile phone and find out what the weather is. That association then gets married to what that overall service design construct is, and we research that, we identify it, we map it out, we whiteboard. I mean, it's an incredibly collaborative environment that we are in when we do this. And then as it moves into that user experience, as you engage with that application, then there's that understanding of what do you want to do, what are your goals, what are the behavioral influences that may have you change your patterns of how you'd use the application. That's the greater core of the user experience that we then identify and architect, and we use interaction design, we use accessibility standards, we use research, we use information architecture, all of these different practices within our group to identify what are those core goals to get you from A to B. So another takeaway is if it's not measurable, it's hypothetical. Now there's some good sort of air quotes in here. Don't just run with this, guys, and just say, okay, great, I can just run out in the world and say, hey, brilliant. You need to, do we just need to measure everything and all that? It's not necessarily. It's a greater principle to what we approach clients to, because when they come to us sometimes, they have certain assumptions, perhaps what their customers are doing, who they're trying to reach, identify their goals. And so we go back to them and say, let's do some research. Let's throw some ideas. Let's interview some people. Let's do some contextual inquiries. Let's do some just quick. Maybe we'll do an open card sort or reverse card sort to identify what that is occurring within the user research, and then apply that into a journey. So if we were to stop for a moment and just take like the banking perspective, we see now the rapid evolution of the mobile device becoming a transactional. So again, this is where, when I was mentioning earlier, and I was getting all excited about what I do, and hopefully that you all in the room are getting excited about and understanding what's going on, is that these devices are not just your mobile device. It's no longer, it's not just even a phone. I mean, it's so much more than that, and it's to a point to where even though we still call it a phone, it's not in the conventional sense of what a phone is. I mean, my son, funny story, he's 10 years old now, and he went trick-or-treating last Halloween, and they had this sort of like spooky phone out the front with a cord, and he actually didn't know what it was. Like, that's the transitory experience that one has in terms of their association with it, right? And so you're seeing this more and more of that evolution. So coming back then to like a banking perspective, we don't just look at just what the goals are within the phone device. We're trying to identify what is the environment, what are the decisions that you're making. So that might just start with like, what are you looking for when you commonly shop for? What are your motivations for when you're shopping? Are you in a rush? Do you like to take your time? Are certain activities of shopping more leisurely than others? And then we evaluate other criteria for those decisions, like how does the environment affect you? If you see a logo, for example, does that trigger a reaction where you have that association of whether it's easy or not to use? And that brand perspective, we used to look at brands as a logo, in its infancy, going back 20 years. Obviously, as we all know now, probably in our education, is that it's so much more now. The experience is becoming, and how we interact with those products becomes the greater essence of that brand. So then moving, into the middle here, like what triggers or inciting actions, what are your goals for when you're browsing, when you want to, do you, for example, want to do quick pay, or a MasterCard has their Pay Pass, there's Apple Pay. What are those other decisions that are influencing what you would actually utilize to pay your transaction? And then into a greater depth of then if you check your account, then how are you checking your account? Are you using a tablet? Are you going to your desktop? If you go to a desktop, does your behavior change a bit more? Are you a little bit more leisure in that practice versus an iPad? It's, for example, it's interesting how the iPad has almost taken over the leisureness of a desktop. Traditionally, when someone was at a desktop computer, which, big, massive thing that you couldn't move around and you were at a desk, that was kind of this essence that, okay, you're kind of sitting down and you're relaxed. That has now been replaced by the tablet devices, to where now you can lounge on your couch and you're much more comfortable in that environment than you are with a mobile phone, which is like, hey, I just want to get this done. Let's just, get through this and move on to the next thing. How fast can I, execute this, this goal to reach my objectives? And if I enjoy it, then it's that recursive use, over and over again. It's that joy that we bring to that immediacy of being able to achieve that goal. And then, lastly, where do we cross-sell opportunities? How can we infuse other areas of trust and love? We talk about love at FJORD, where it's the love or joy that you get out of using something, out of using that living service. Even just incremental amounts of joy peppered along the way creates a greater experience to creating a recursive use. And it's that trigger mechanism it's, I mean, we could get into like the psychology and the chemistry of the brain. Obviously, I'm sure I'm not going to be that professor to you guys right now. I'll save that, for a class that you may take. But the point being is that you see that greater journey. So the other thing I just wanted to touch briefly on is just that information architecture and interaction design is a very closely associated process. Information architecture creates a greater strategy about what on the page level needs to occur, what the goals are, how do we chart that journey for them. Then concurrently, the interaction design, we measure and we research on an interactivity level. That's the word, interactivity. That's my new word. That point being is that then that feeds into greater understanding of cross-navigation. So when we talk about, and again, I won't touch upon all of these points, but I just wanted to put down a few areas of how we apply research, whether it's shadowing customers when they're in an environment, understanding their decisions and charting out decision ladders, or creating directed storytelling, identifying archetypes, how we use service design, concepting, or other research-based initiatives that we have. We chart that out and we create that experience that helps us identify that greater experience architecture. And then how does that then apply in a UX methodology? For example, we will use everything from like mental modeling to concept modeling. We commonly use open card sorts, closed card sorts, even reverse card sort for validating the experience. Are we testing and making sure that we hit a certain achievable quality assurance in terms of the architecture that we just constructed from the open card sort or closed card sort research that gave us that direction. Content strategy, navigational frameworks. And then how that then feeds into interaction design, visual design. We have a methodology, of course, that applies to that. I'm not going to go into that today, of course. It's just not enough time. Frankly, I'm sure there's other people that could speak to that even more fluently. But, that is the greater understanding of just how research is applied within our work. And then another area of this is, I don't know if this has been coined before, but I'm just going to coin it. It's something that I throw around a lot, is this idea of semantic architecture. And so what is that? It just, I kind of, okay, does that mean you reword architecture a little differently? It's when you talk about how the brain, how the mind formulates a journey. It can sometimes be applied to the linguistics of it. If you were to, write out a sentence to explain how a person goes from A to B in either in a services experience or in a user experience design segment, if you were to say, like, since I am a blank and I need to blank for my blank that will support. It sounds like I'm swearing, but I'm not. This is the idea where you actually fill in those words to identify that greater journey of how you would want to construct the that experience. So what do I mean? And I'll just pause for a moment just to table that to actually get into an understanding of where I'm going with that. So I'm going to just take a moment and briefly just cover a client example. And I can't really use names because there's confidentiality and whatnot, but this was a utility company, electric and gas utility company that we provided several weeks of work for them. And we essentially identified business goals. We had a discover process where we identify those goals and user research. We analyzed, from deltas between the site, and the user grouping. We ideated, the area of like iterative, like low fidelity wireframes, essentially. And then from there, we also and concurrently then ideated on the information architecture as well, based on the research that we found. So, for example, like the gaps were like that there was a despairingly amount of of acquired legacy business. This utility company had acquired another utility company, their competitor in the area, and through that acquisition they had 2 different sites. So we had to understand the different customers, the different archetypes and personas for within those customers, understand like regional and state regulated navigation. We had identified that. We had identified, for example, like navigation. The navigation itself was very business focused. It's like, here, if you want electricity, this is what you'd want to do, or if you wanted gas, this is what you would do. We had to break that down and really resolve it to have a greater understanding of that they had both customers on a non-business level, just your home personal customers, and then you had the business customers as well. Well, what we found in that research was a greater shift between a very efficiency-based customer that just essentially said, I just want to save money. That's really all I'm looking for. Find me ways to save money, and I want to navigate through the site in that concurrent way. So likewise, on the reverse, when we did the research with business customers, because we did testing for both, we identified residential customers and we also identified their business customers. And we did an open card sort where we just put it out there and said, okay, how would you sort these different tasks? And what the research then provided was, as they became a larger and larger business, they migrated to being very specific and saying, like, I need to find ways to offload some of my electricity, or get better power consumption or efficiency in my plant. Those areas became much more of a tailored experience on a product level than it became a deconstruction of what those products and services were by flipping it instead to an efficiency-driven benefit. So I'm just going to, again, we can always come back to this because I'm trying to move through this rather rapidly to give some time for Q&A for everyone. But you can just, hopefully from here, you can get a greater understanding of where we were going with that. So another takeaway is then clarifying within information architecture findability versus discoverability. This is a big thing when you're talking with clients. It's at least on my level, when clients have these goals and they have these business drivers, you have to break it down between customers that want to find that particular product versus they also want to discover. They may not have that awareness of what they're looking for. They just have a larger goal of what they want to do. In this case, they just want to save money. So then you have to create discovery within that site. If you build a site that is only built on findability, siloed down to like, this is this product, and tier A, and tier B, you have a completely different group, or product that has no cross relationship to it. When you build that out, you lose the ability to be discoverable. So what I did here was just quickly build out where we would show an example of a before and after. So what you're seeing on the left here is you're seeing 2 level 1s, for example, the site 1, site 2. Again, I had to white label this a bit more. But I talked about that legacy site that they had acquired, the legacy business, but that was still operation at URL. And then they had the other, so these 2 different sites with 2 different architectures. I had to map that out. And when we created the open card sort, this is what you're seeing down here. So you're seeing at the very bottom this area of like how the customers grouped that. And this is just on a customer level. We did a completely separate one for their businesses as well, because that was a completely different archetype, a different personas. So within that, we went from a bottom-up approach where we said, okay, here's the groupings of what the research is pointing to. Here's the disparity between where this content is versus actually where the customers would find it or look for it in that grouping and that association. And it's just completely across the board. I mean, I could go into this, but what I wanted to just illustrate here is the before and after, or whoops, dear Lord. Nope, my magic mouse is freaking out. Okay, sorry. So within that, you can see on the left, that's the before. The after, what we did is realign based on what the research provided at the bottom by going from a bottom up. Instead of just identifying what the L1s and then making assumptions of where L2s and L3s, that's the trap that most clients fall into. Instead, what you do is you build from the bottom up. You identify what is the research pointing to, what are the cross relationships as well, you know, the ambiguous areas of the research that you want to point to and say, well, it's ambiguous because there's no particular category because, for example, customers really may not even see your product as a product. They may see it as a service, and therefore it stretches across the larger, you know, experience, which is save me money. So then you then map out that cross relationship by then build it up. Then you identify what that content supports, and then from the support of that content, then you build the L3s, the level 2s, the level 1s. And that's when you're at the final state, that's when you're actually saying, okay, level 1, the main navigation header, okay, is actually what all of this content responds to, right? So it's really building from that research, building up instead of from a top down. I hope that explains just an insight as to the applications that we use for research. And lastly, and again, I want to just take time. How are we doing on time here? Let's see here. It's it's 1:30, so we still have like 20 minutes. Okay. So my last takeaway here is metacognition. It's understanding how people think. So it's really profound. You have these people that have that amazing geniusness to almost just look into the future. So Vannevar Bush in 1945 wrote in the Atlantic an article, As We May Think. And you can Google it, it's still out there. It's a really interesting article. And there's several sections where he calls out and this is just like pre-computers. This is he talks about the scenographs and just like this room where like you would have it's kind of funny. I mean, it's in some ways he talks about like girls in room decrypting what is being discussed within like a courtroom or in a meeting, and then they are processing that information into a infrastructure like that is essentially what we would call a server today. But so I mean, it's really kind of, there's some really interesting insights. But out of that, when you look at beyond all the humor of it, it's two things that I wanted to call out. Okay, inheritance is not only his, being the person itself, the human being, his additions to the world's record, but the entire scaffolding by which they are erected. Man cannot hope fully to duplicate this mental process artificially, but he certainly ought to be able to learn from it. So it is when we talk about metacognition, we talk about behavior, we talk about how we make associations to everything we have within our world, within our day-to-day environment, and how we accept those. It's based on that scaffolding. It is that greater architecture of what is occurring in the mind that we essentially have to break down as information architects, as experience architecture to a larger journey is sought after in terms of diagramming and deciphering it. So that's one takeaway. Another one is he talked about at one point a device that he described as called the Memex. And it was a device that he believed would be able to record the overall snapshots of how you went day to day and interacted with different ideas, and then at some point you could chart what that overall journey was to arrive at that final discovery that you needed to have. So that's two things in terms of these endeavors. It's understanding first that you don't just put information down on one person on a page, like we talk like Web 1.0 or even Web 2.0. I don't even know what version we're on at this point, but in the early infancy days of the web, you had just like the idea that, oh, we're just going to put all the information that we need to have on one page, and when they go to that page, they'll read through it all, and they'll just immediately be able to make a sound decision off of that experience, off of that knowledge. But that's not what happens in the human brain. What really happens is that you have this journey, you have this experience where you can cursively learn over and over again and build a greater understanding and a greater idea of what you need to action off of than just a singular page, right? So that's one takeaway. Because in this description, the human mind does not work that way. It operates by association. With one item in its grasp, and again I'm quoting this, it snaps instantly into the next that is suggested by the association of thoughts in accordance with some intricate web of trails carried by the cells in the brain. So the other takeaway, and there's some really interesting startup-like initiatives around this this idea, but it's to start to chart out how a person would navigate through the website, and then from there be able to respond. We are in our working with clients are using content management systems to architect what that experience is. It's not that you have a static page here and you have a static page there. It's that you actually identify through taxonomy, folksonomy, you identify the user journeys, you identify the gaps in those journeys, you understand behaviors and goals, and through that you architect a site that responds to that based on that journey that they're taking. It's incredibly complex. It's not an easy task, but again, leveraging research gets us to those goals. So with that, I just going to stop and just pause. Guys, we're almost at it.
Yeah, we're unmuted.
Oh, okay. Does anyone have any questions for Josh?
So I definitely do. So I guess you're a manager, correct? So you're kind of in a unique position to tell us sort of what you're looking for, hopefully, and like potential applicants or employees, like what kind of skills or qualities you look for. Since I know some of us are getting ready to graduate, unfortunately not me, but just so we know.
So, we look for two things when we're hiring. And again, I'm cautious because I'm just we have them in the ways that I do applicants. There's also managers, other directors that also handle a lot of this as well. We have a whole hiring staff. But when I look for people, especially on a contractor level, I look for two things. First of all, their ability to break down in a very easy and clear way a process. Can they evaluate what is occurring based on gaps? Can they quickly itemize what those gaps are? Can they quickly itemize and then take that analysis and take it to another level of providing a greater strategic direction as to what that is? So, for example, can they quickly break down a problem, understand, ask the right questions, because it's always very clear. A lot of people make one of the biggest things I see with interviews when I throw out a challenge to someone, they just immediately try to rationalize what that challenge is without asking more questions. So it's about and if nobody asks me questions, if there's a candidate that's just not asking me a question, I'll just be like, no, this is immediate flag for me, because there's still questions to be asked. You can't be all answered in just the 3 or 4 sentences that I put out to there, and that's okay. It's okay, because it's really the insightful questions that you ask. It's about the analysis that you're trying to do, and sometimes I can just learn a great deal from the questions that are being asked. How intellectually are you evaluating that challenge? The other aspect then is the analysis, how they would then not necessarily fully solve the problem. I'm not always so much looking for that, because again, it's impossible without taking an hour or two of actually doing a full mock challenge or mock instance of a say a project that's like a hypothetical project, and say, what would you do? Instead, really, it's about understanding how would they solve for that. Do they have a good understanding? Did they come to our to the interview understanding what our methodology is? If they didn't, are they immediately asking those questions? And then from there, how would they respond to those activities? How would they approach that based on the different types of activities that we have? Open card sort, closed card sort, heuristic, contextual input. That's the greater understanding that I want to be able to have with any candidate, to have an understanding, because there's a lot of great designers out there. And then there's also a lot of great designers that elevate the game by being able to apply and understand that research. Then below that fold, there's also a lot of people that just say that they're user experience designers, but they haven't applied the understanding of what the research is to their design. The traditional scope of design that's taught in so many schools, and I went to a design school. I went to Savannah College of Art and Design, and it was a very good school. Other design schools sometimes approach from like a color theory or a typography or that understanding, and that's good. It's not necessarily bad. It's something you need, but then it's also having that understanding of what that design evokes on a behavioral level. So I'm going to just stop there, and hopefully that answers some of your questions. That question. I want to throw them out.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Appreciate that. So I don't know if you saw we've got a remote participant as well named Yulin, and you go over on the left and click on the chat button. You can see your question, but I can read it to you as well.
Okay.
Can you briefly mention some typical UX research methods that are used for validation, as in on slide 15?
Okay.
Also, is it normal that validation occurs before design?
So that is a great question. Just to clarify on the information architecture segment of our process. So, although I didn't draw this out in a complete matter, let me just go back for a second here. This is just a snippet of what is okay. This is just a snippet of like what is occurring at the information architecture level, but then we have like a staggered progress process where we will also then have interaction design overlap, but start at a later phase, depending on the project. Sometimes it doesn't always work that way, but in an ideal situation, then we bring interaction designers to start to solve for the greater construct, low fidelities, sketches, just really processing what that user journey is, and then from there we then go into the visual design and we apply that from the analysis. But we will, if I'm answering your question, validate the user visual design as well. We will at times, if the budget allows us, to be able to do research that validates if they if they, like the layout of this page, if they can find everything within that site, we will do, we'll take, 14, 15 participants and just run tasks by them, challenge them to find something on a site. Do they like what is being told on the site? Do they understand the visuals? So I hope that answers your question. We do apply user research to visual design. It's just a further down process, and I didn't want that one slide to confuse you as to it was just identifying the information architecture in terms of validating.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So I guess I'll go again. Sure, so can you just give us like an example of like a text or something that's sort of your go-to manual, or even just like an author of text that's changed the way you do your job recently, or like a method you're really excited about or something like that? Since most of us don't come from a UX background, we're overwhelmingly human factors. We take some UX classes and we're exposed to the methods, but it's not something that's ingrained in us necessarily. So you're a great resource for that if you've got one.
Well, gosh, that's been asked for me.
I hate to put you on the spot like that.
That's okay. That's okay. It's been asked before, and certainly there are conferences out there. There are classes that you can take. What I want to evoke is, if anything, is obviously you're not going to learn everything coming out of college. It's just not possible. And the person that I was when I came out of college was very much a different person than I am today. It's, if I can just give any sense of comfort to everybody in the room and anybody that's listening, post this and watching on the video recording, is the understanding that when you come out of college, you have a grounded level understanding of something that you can build on. That's all college really is. I have, over the years, I mean, when I graduated a little over 10 years ago, user experience was not something that was widely even taught within a lot of schools. And I could be wrong, and maybe somebody's going to flag me and say, hey, that's not correct. But in what I'm trying to say is that it has evolved so rapidly over the years that really the only way to do it is to get in, to find a job that is promising, where it gives you that opportunity to challenge yourself and go into every project or every type of activity that you have to perform within that by applying that foundation to it. I mean, I'll be quite frank, I mean, there's projects that I go into, every project we go into, we're with open eyes and open ears. And it's about, I may not know, I just started, working with a telecom company, but I just came out of working with a large insurance company. Neither which I had a great deal of knowledge as to their business, right? I mean, that's not my major, but my ability to be able to analyze, break the understanding of what needs to be achieved, asking the right questions, having that greater discovery, and not having my own personal bias as to what should be done, but actually building on my greater knowledge of how I've solved problems in the past, is how I then build off of that project. So it's just don't feel like you have to be an expert coming out of college, because it's just, if you're going to be an expert out of college, then you're never going to graduate. I mean, I hope you find that humorous, because it's the truth of the matter. Is life is that experience, and college is just one more employer that you're going to go through, and you're going to have that greater experience. It's going to give you that ability to evolve and take it to the next level. Does that help?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question to that. It seems like a lot of what you're saying, like asking the right questions and so on and so forth, would come from experience, because I don't know that we would ever even learn that in college necessarily. And so the advice that most people give us to sort of set us apart from other people when applying for jobs is internships, and that's how we can gain experience. But do you have any other thoughts or recommendations about how we could gain some additional experience so that we are sort of setting ourselves apart and thinking in the right way? Maybe not the right way, but thinking in those terms.
So yeah, I mean, oh gosh,
Sorry. It's kind of a hard question. I don't know.
So here's like maybe if I can answer that Whitney a little bit more is just find out what you really love to do. I mean, when I went into college, I wanted to be an architect. Like, no, I actually wanted to build buildings. I love the idea of architecture, and I loved like creating. And then I actually went through college and realized, well, I'd be stuck at a desk for 5, 10 years, just drawing out plans that someone else had envisioned. And I said, well, I just hate that idea. That's not me as a person. And so then I got into video, and I started taking some video classes. Then I took some computer art classes, and took graphic design classes, and from there went into the agency world where I was doing post-production. That post-production then led me to greater opportunities to get into new media, and then from new media I got into interaction design and essentially web development, right, in its infancy. And then from that, I just built and built and built, and went from one agency to the corporate life. Or for a while, I was working in corporations, and then I eventually found myself at Accenture / FJORD, where that opportunity just built another experience of what I wanted to do. So I can't really necessarily answer that question, but what I hope to give a greater response is just be true to yourself. Be true to like what you want to do, and then from there just read, evolve, learn. I do my best to try to just go to meetups and find out what other people are doing in the group. I like to find out what's being posted online, some conferences, what are patterns that are being discussed in terms of how people are approaching research, and then I map that to that. But start to also become a visionary as much as you can. To start to like say what you believe things should be in the near-term future, because when you start to have that dialogue, Brittany, is when you then surround yourself around other people with that same vision, and that's when you start to create a greater understanding of what you want to do. So hopefully that just creates a better understanding that it's okay to not know exactly what you need to do. Just be true to yourself in terms of that goal. I know that was very like way out in left park, but it's how I can describe it.
No, I absolutely love that answer. So thank you. Yeah, it was a perfect answer.
Good.
So to wrap things up, are there any additional questions? If anyone has any follow-up questions, is it okay that I pass along your email?
Not a problem. I will do my best to respond to it.
Okay.
Probably would be the week.
Okay, excellent. Well, we all want to thank you so much, Josh. This was a great presentation. We really appreciated your time and all of the knowledge that you shared with us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Again, I appreciate this opportunity to talk and hopefully inspire you about what you want to do, and just best wishes to you all.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Happy Friday.
Yay.
Bye. Bye.